Hello everybody, my name is Isabel. I am 20 years old and I am currently pregnant with my first child who is completely and totally unplanned. Which is why I am making this video and starting this channel, because even though he was unplanned and when I found out I was pregnant I was absolutely terrified, I still love my baby very much. My child is already my whole world, even though I don't know what our future looks like. And things are really uncertain and things can kind of seem a little bit scary. My hope is that by sharing my life and his life and him growing up, that I will be able to reach other mothers out there who are in the same position and let them know that they are not alone. Alright, more about me. As I said earlier, I am 20 years old. I am in college working on getting my degree in speech and language pathology. I work a part-time job and I am still living at home. I can honestly say that I've had a pretty decent life, and I've always been surrounded by people who loved and supported me, which is, it's kind of hard not to be when you grow up in a family of 9 kids. And on top of there being 9 children, we were all raised Catholic and homeschooled. That's pretty much all I'm going to share about my family right now. They've asked to remain private, and I'm going to respect that. All you need to know is that they're all super awesome people. We're mostly girls, and I can count on my siblings and my parents to be there and to support me and to help me if ever I needed it. Alright, back to me. Let's talk about how I got pregnant and how I feel about that. So, as I said earlier, I was raised Catholic, and Catholicism teaches that sex is something that belongs in marriage. And one of these days, I will have to do a video on that because I agree with their reasoning, and I think it is a beautiful reasoning. A reason worth sharing, even if that's not the way you've chosen to live your life. As a kid, I had chosen to live by my faith. I love my faith. I still love my faith, even though I've made mistakes. As a child, it was so important to me, and it does not mean that I was like this perfect little angel child, because I was definitely not. But especially when I got into my teen years, I had a passion for my faith and I really wanted to follow it out, and I started to develop a really amazing and awesome relationship with God, and I loved it. And that relationship continued to grow stronger and stronger and led me to a religious program being run by my church called Totus Tuus. College-age young adults are trained to work as a team, to go to different churches and teach about their faith. It was a super amazing opportunity and I absolutely loved it, and I enjoyed not every minute of it because there are some hard things, but I enjoyed a lot of it. In the process of my diocese building that team, we had some trouble finding missionaries because it was the first year that we were running it, and sometimes it can kind of, when you're starting something new, it can be hard to get people on board with it. So what my parish ended up doing was bringing somebody from Kansas, which is where this program is actually founded. So they brought our last male missionary to complete our team of 2 boys, 2 girls, up from Kansas, and I may have ended up falling a little bit more than in love with him. Of course, during the program, dating was not allowed. You were not allowed to have any romantic relationship at all. You were solely there to teach your faith, to have fun with children, and it was a blast. But I had to keep those feelings that I started to feel for this person kind of on the back burner and not let them get in the way, because I had to focus on teaching my faith to the children. And obviously, that kind of thing just really doesn't belong in a program like that. There are really good reasons for not having that. Regardless, after that was all said and done and the program had run its course, this young man and I talked about our feelings for each other and decided that we want to keep in touch. Even though he had to go back to Kansas, we made the decision to keep talking to each other. So this young man's name is Curtis, and who ended up eventually being my boyfriend. But how it started out was we were calling each other every night, and during the missionary program that we did, we spent a lot of time praying, and so what we did was we kept up some of those prayers every time we call each other. So we were calling each other every single night. We're talking for hours, And I probably drove my family absolutely nuts with just how much I talked about this person and just how infatuated I was with him. I think this was a really special time for our relationship because we were really getting to know each other, we were praying together, and we were really letting God into our relationship. And that's how our faith teaches it should be, is that you need to have God in your relationship, and the more you let God into your relationship, the closer these two people will grow together. So I think we were going really close, and we had a lot of the same views. We both had a passion for our faith, and I really enjoyed conversation with him. It was just a really great time. And even though he was so far away, I still enjoyed talking to him, and our nightly conversations became one of my favorite parts of my day. I did, however, have a problem where I was considering religious life and I wanted to join a sisterhood, and I didn't know if I should date him because I was considering that. But after talking to a nun about it, she told me that I really shouldn't consider the sisterhood unless I had tried the other part of this. And to me that just made sense. I should at least try dating before I fully pledge myself to sisterhood, because I don't even know if I'm cut out for one or the other unless I try something. So I already tried going and visiting the convent, hanging out with these nuns, and so it just made sense to also try the other thing. So in the November after I met Curtis, he and I decided to start dating. By now you're probably wondering, how did this girl get pregnant? They're in a long distance relationship, and clearly they both love their faith, and their faith teaches that sex is something that belongs in marriage. So how did she get pregnant outside of marriage? Well, at this point, I'm still only 18, but we were going to be in a long distance relationship forever. And in December 2018, the December after Curtis and I had met, he decided that he wanted to move up to New York and made plans to do so at the end of that January. So at the end of January 2019, Curtis was in New York, living closer to where I was. During the time that he decided to move up, I was already experiencing some pretty difficult issues to deal with. As a kid, I was pretty anxious, but I had mostly grown out of that. But once I had started school, and I went through my first semester of school doing pretty well, but second semester of school, I started working as well. And I found with my first semester of school that my anxiety started to come back, and it got worse with the second semester. On top of that, I also got depression, and I was working. I had basically filled my time so much that I had no other time other than to go to work and do school, and it was draining me. And what ended up happening is I put my relationship with God kind of on the back burner because I had to focus on school and I had to focus on work. I didn't have time to pray, and I didn't have time for that relationship that I loved so much. So that had become very deteriorated, and I spent most of my time feeling scared, upset, and sad, and worried that I could not be good enough at school or I would never get good enough grades. And I just spent way too much time worrying about that. At this point, I do want to be clear that Curtis was aware of this before he moved up from Kansas, and my parents were also aware that I was struggling. But with all of these struggles, things started to go downhill. And if you want to remain in a chaste relationship, you've got to set up boundaries and you've got to keep them there, because once they're broken, and they are so much harder to keep, because once you break them once, you begin to kind of trick yourself into thinking, well, I broke it once. Can't be that bad to break it again. Which is what started to happen. So Curtis was now physically present to me, and because I was in such an anxious state, I wanted to be held by somebody. I wanted nothing more than to just have someone hold me in their arms. And while that in itself would have been fine, I let it get further. And it was something that we both did. It was both of our mistake. As we started, just sitting there on the couch, sitting close to each other wasn't enough, and we started to break down all of the boundaries that we had put up. Eventually, the only boundary we had left was no sex. We drew the line at having sex. And that's a really, really low boundary to have, and it makes having a chaste relationship so difficult. And if you've already broken all of these other boundaries, you can only assume that eventually you're going to break that one too. So we both made a pretty hard decision. we decided that our relationship needed to take a break. We needed to separate ourselves from each other in order to build up those boundaries, because if we kept on going as we were going to end up sleeping together. So we took a break, which we were not perfect with. We had a really hard time actually separating from ourselves from each other. And we would still see each other sometimes, mostly, though, in the presence of other people. We spent a lot less time alone, and it did help. And we started to build back up those boundaries for ourselves, and it was a very helpful time, though not perfect. Then we ended up both deciding that summer we wanted to go back and do the same missionary program that we had done last year. And so this would be Curtis's 3rd year and my 2nd year of doing this. So during that summer, I think we did a lot to build our relationship back up. And the best thing that we did is I started to repair my relationship with God, and we started to pray together again. And that was the best thing we could possibly have done for our relationship. So at the end of that year of Totus Tuus, we decided we would start dating again. And for a while, it was really good. We were praying every night again. We were talking to each other. We were spending time in a chaste manner. We made sure that we weren't alone. And for almost a month, that was how it was. And we were doing a really good job. And then I had something happen to me that I really don't want to go into detail about here, because it's something that's in the past, and I've since made friends with it, and it wasn't anything absolutely horrible or terrifying, but it was something that surprised me and made me uncomfortable, and maybe had all of these fears and anxiety around my virginity, which really was kind of, I look back on it and I kind of see it as, didn't really need to do that, but once again, I was not doing a very good job with controlling my anxiety, and I let it get out of control. And what I ended up doing was letting fear control my decisions, which meant that since I had this fear around, someone could take my virginity and it would not be my choice. And I just couldn't fathom the idea of that happening. I know this has happened to some women, and I was so scared of it. I really didn't have a reason to be afraid of it, because I was loved and protected by so many people. I never went anywhere alone, and I was just never in a place where that could have happened to me. But regardless, I let fear control what I did. And so what ended up happening was I slept with my boyfriend. This was something that Curtis and I then both started to struggle with. We had broken that one boundary that we had left, and of course we had even gotten to the point where we had built back up all those boundaries, but then we broke this one. And once you've broken that one, you've gone really far, and it's so hard to stop. And so we made several attempts to stop. We would stop for a couple of weeks and then would make another mistake. But through perseverance, and from getting help with talking to a priest about this, and I was also seeing a therapist and was getting more control over my anxiety, we were able to return to a place of chastity. It was really hard, and it took a lot of effort. It took us getting back to praying with each other. But in December 2019, we returned to a chaste relationship. And I remember December 2019 being a really amazing, happy month for me. School was out, finals were over, second week of December, finals were done. I didn't have that to be anxious about. Curtis and I were not sleeping with each other anymore. We were being really good. We were living a chaste relationship. I was living by my faith. I had somebody to help me, and it was Christmas season, which is one of my favorites. And I was just so much happier. And I just remember it being a really good month. Every single time I look back to December of 2019, I was just like, that was a really great month. And I loved it. And by now, I probably should say that when I get anxious, I feel like I have a stomach bug. And my stomach will just be really upset and off. I don't really I might feel a little tired. I just feel kind of sick. I also have super irregular cycles, which is probably linked to my anxiety levels, which can mess up how your cycle works. So with finals coming up in the beginning of December, I didn't think anything of it, that I started to feel really nauseous all the time, and that I was tired or stressed out because I was working, I was going to school, and it was finals week. which is the most stressful week of the semester. So I did not think anything of it. And then afterwards, when finals week was finally over, and I was still feeling sick, I really didn't think of it, much of it, because I also feel sick if I get overly excited about things. And even though I love Christmas, there is a certain amount of anxiety surrounding it, so I didn't really think much of feeling sick. And I certainly didn't think much of my period not being on time, because it never was. I had like this is the week this could happen, and maybe it would happen in that week. So it being a week late was a little not normal, but not by much. So basically what should have happened was about a week before Christmas, I was expecting my period. And it just didn't come. And I even had this really comical conversation with Curtis on Christmas night, where I was like, I feel really sick, and my period still isn't here. And jokingly was like, I could be pregnant. But in the back of my head, I was thinking, no way. There is no way I'm pregnant. You know, the last time we had sex was not a time that I could possibly have gotten pregnant. And my period was late all the time. And I always feel sick. So there's no possible way I'm pregnant. It's just not a reality that's going to happen. Curtis was less convinced. And when I told him that I was feeling sick, that I had missed my period, he was like, maybe we should take a test. So I still thought it was silly, but agreed. And I have to say, there is a certain amount of like, even though you're positive, you still want that test showing you like, there is no way. So I agreed to take the test. And after work one day, I stopped by at Curtis's apartment to take the test because he said he wanted to be there, which I agreed with. Like, that just makes sense. And so I got there. He gave me the test because he bought them because I was too embarrassed to buy them myself. So he had bought the test, and it was one of those digital ones that says the yes or no. So I went to the bathroom, I took the test, I sat on the bathroom counter and was fixing my hair, which was gone completely frizzy from being at work all day. So I just remember brushing my fingers through my hair and thinking to myself, this is silly. Like, even when Curtis had handed me the test, I was just like giggling, like, this is so silly. I am not pregnant. And I casually just glanced down at the test and froze because there across the screen was the word yes. And about 2 seconds after I saw it, I ran out of the bathroom, and obviously I didn't have to say anything to Curtis. He just knew by my face. And I was terrified. I started crying. I had no idea what I was gonna do. I was only 19 years old. I could not support myself. I still lived at home. I was in college. Like, what on earth was I gonna do? And this is the moment that I absolutely love, and I will always remember. Because I was freaking out, and I was terrified. And Curtis just very calmly got up from the chair that he was sitting in, wrapped his arms around me, and said, this is amazing. We're gonna have a baby. Like, you are growing a life. That is amazing. And I just love that even though I was terrified, I was distracted about all of these things that worrying me, Curtis just loved our baby right off the bat. After getting over the shock, I did acknowledge, like, yes, it was amazing. And it took me a few minutes. I probably said it like 30 times that night. There's a child growing inside of me. And I just, like, could not get through that idea. But obviously, life had to go on. And I didn't tell my parents right away. And Curtis and I talked about, well, let's wait. Maybe, you know, I could still miscarry. It was still really early on in my pregnancy. But I ended up talking to a friend about it and got some advice as it's probably not a good idea, and I should probably just tell my parents as soon as possible. So about a week after I found out, I had no plans to tell my mother, but I got home from work one night and I was so stressed and so exhausted and so tired of keeping it a secret that the whole story just came out. And it was just me and my mom sitting there and me sobbing and telling her the entire story that I just told you. And she kind of surprised me by saying I was a little suspicious that this might have been going on. And she was a little suspicious all of December of me being pregnant. Which I was surprised, but pleasantly surprised and just kind of glad that she had known all along, or at least had had an idea, and that during December she had realized the possibility of me being pregnant. There was just something really comforting to her knowing that. But of course she was super loving, super supportive, and she offered to tell my father, which I was really afraid to just tell anybody, because here I was, 19 years old, pregnant, I couldn't support myself, and I was pregnant outside of marriage, which was not something that my faith taught is okay. So I was just really afraid to tell anyone. So my mom told my father, and we told my siblings, and I told my friends, and slowly everybody knew. And it actually was really surprisingly, like, just a lot of people were just super supportive and just immediately had that reaction of like, well, that's, you know, she's growing a life, that's beautiful, and we're gonna love the baby anyway. So it was a terrifying experience, but kind of cool to see that I was surrounded by so many amazing people who would react that way. Where I'm at with my pregnancy now, I am 34 and a half-ish weeks, probably might be 35 before I post this video, and if you hadn't guessed by the name of the channel, baby's name is Amos, which means strength, which I think is a super important name for him and for me. So hopefully I will be continuing to post more videos and continuing to share his story, and I'm really, really excited to share his story. I'm really excited to share how something can seem so terrifying and so much like a disaster in the beginning, especially when you have something as so serious as finding out that you are pregnant and it was not planned, and maybe you're not in a position to handle it at all, like I was. But it doesn't mean that it has to be a disaster in the end, and mine certainly has not been. And so far has been an incredible, somewhat bumpy and rough journey, but it has been an amazing journey, and I know that in the end, I'm going to love Amos, and that he is going to continue to be my whole world as my child.